18th of March 2009. We are at the New York State Military Museum and Veterans Research Center in Saratoga Springs, New York. My name is Wayne Clark. Sir, for the record, would you please state your full name and your date and place of birth, please?
My name is Paul J. Dobbins. I was born in Martins Ferry, Ohio on June the 28th, 1924.
Did you attend school there?
I attended high school, Martins Ferry High School, and graduated in 1942.
Okay. After you graduated, did you go to work or did you go to college? Or?
I graduated and I went to college. I went to the Lindsley Military Institute for 1 year. And after that year, I was drafted into the Army.
Okay.
And I went into the Army in September of 1943.
Okay, whereabouts?
My basic training was down in Camp Van Doren, Mississippi. And after my basic training, I was transferred to the 80th.
Okay, let me just go back to basic. What was your basic training like down there?
Well, the basic training was really rough. I was just out of high school and in relatively good physical condition, so it wasn't too bad for me. But a lot of the older men, when I'm saying older, that's people in their 30s, failed. They were transferred out. They couldn't make it.
Now, did you train with the World War I type uniforms or the helmets and the? No,
we had regular World War II type uniforms and so forth. The training in Mississippi was rather harsh because the area was full of swamps and the land had a lot of trees on it. And we went on what we call maneuvers out there. They'd get us out of bed in the middle of the night and take us out there and leave us and then tell us we had to get back on our own. So most of us who survived were in very good physical condition. Okay.
Did you train on the Springfield rifle or with the M1 Garand?
There we trained with almost all infantry weapons. We had the 03 Springfield, we trained with the M1, we trained with the carbine, we learned machine guns, we learned mortars, we learned how to throw hand grenades. It was really a crash course in all infantry weapons.
No, this was just strictly basic training.
This was strictly basic training, but most of the officers and non-commissioned officers who trained us had come back from Africa in 1943. So they were a bunch of tough fellows.
Okay. And was that your first time away from home?
No, I've been away from home several times before. During my high school career, I would go up to Pittsburgh to visit my aunt and uncle and stay with them for a few weeks to see the Pirates play baseball. Okay.
All right. And once you completed basic training, where were you sent next?
I was sent home for a week's leave, and when I came back, the orders were cut, and I was transferred up to the 83rd Infantry Division at Camp Breckenridge, Kentucky. And the 83rd Infantry Division had been training for over a year and a half, and they were ready to go to Europe. Okay. They didn't tell us that they were ready to go to Europe, but we knew they were ready to go somewhere. And what happened when I went into that outfit, and there were a lot of other fellows who came from Camp Van Doren with me, we were what I call the extra fellows. You know, each squad had 12 men in it. 3 times 12 is 36 a platoon. Well, all the platoons were full there, but each platoon picked up about 3 extra fellows. And the reason they did that, they figured they'd lose somebody on the way from the United States over to Europe. So they were plus so far as men were concerned. So we were put in with fellows who had been training for over a year and a half.
How were you guys accepted by the old salts?
Well, the old salts weren't too old. I was 19, the old salts were 21, 22, and 23. Okay. So we were very well accepted. Okay. And they acted like, I don't want to say a father figure, but they showed us all the ropes. And the thing that I remember most vividly was that we did train with live ammunition. We lay down on the ground, crawled under live machine gun fire. We went out on the artillery range and followed artillery rolling up. And the thing that I remember most, I knew I was going overseas. My mother and my aunt were coming down to visit me. And when they came into camp, they said that we saw in the paper where there was an accident, somebody was killed, an ammunition dump blew up. But what had happened was that we were out in the field and the artillery was supposed to move ahead of us, and it didn't move. It came behind us, and it killed a half a dozen people. So that was the kind of things that we were exposed to, but we really just accepted it. That was the way things were, and it was just an accident to us.
Mm-hmm. Now, how long did you train before they sent the whole division overseas?
Well, we really didn't do much training, mainly physical conditioning, because I was just there a month or so before we went overseas.
Okay. And did you go over in a convoy?
Yes, we went over a convoy. We left Camp Breckenridge, came to Camp Shanks in New York, and then we took our new rifles up to West Point to calibrate them, because we were there several weeks. And the first thing you know, we were on those ships and we were out in the Atlantic Ocean on the way to Liverpool.
Okay. What was it like aboard ship?
To me, it was pretty good because I didn't get seasick. And I could get down and eat every day, but most of the fellows were turning yellow in their bunks. And the thing that I remember most of all, the convoy was going across the Atlantic. It was rough, but not completely a storm. And the little Canadian, they called them corvettes, I think, would come around looking for submarines, and when they get an alert, they go whoop, 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 and go in and out of the convoy and throw over the ash cans and make look like many atom bombs all over the ocean there, which is, of course, it was very dangerous, but we were too dumb to know it.
All right, and whereabouts did you land? Did you land in England?
It took us, and I remember this precisely, 14 days to go across. We landed at Liverpool, which was completely fogged in. We stayed on the ships for 3 days in Liverpool Harbor before we went ashore.
And what was that date, do you recall, approximately?
I'm guessing now, I could look it up, but I think it was in the winter. It was probably last of March, the 1st of April we went across.
Okay, and that was in 43?
That was in 1944.
44, okay. All right, and once you disembarked from the ship, were you sent for additional training at that point?
What we did, we got off the ship, got on a train, and went to the English countryside in the Midlands. We had no barracks, we had no places, we were like gypsies. We stayed in I remember the name of the estate we stayed on, Lord Hamner's estate. We were specifically told not to pester the swans because they were property of the king. I specifically remember. And we stayed there for a few weeks, and then we packed up and we left. In the time that we were in England before the invasion, we had no place to go. We moved around everywhere.
Did you live in tents?
We had our one or two places. We had these what I call pyramid tents, where a whole squad could live in. Most of the time, we just slept in our what do you call them, little pup tents. And one of the things that I do remember is that we had to go to Wales to zero in our rifles, which we already zeroed in before we came over. It was just another exercise in walking, and we marched all over the Midlands of England. But the things that I remember precisely there was that we were in General Patton's Third Army. If you remember, General Patton was a distraction. And he would come around and talk to us, and I do remember him coming telling us that he wanted us to make the Germans die for their country, and he didn't want any of us to die for our country.
So how close did you get to Patton?
Well, I didn't shake his hand, but I got close enough I could yell something at him if I wanted to. And we not only had him come, we had doctors come and tell us it would be perfectly normal to wet your pants when these things are happening to you. Don't worry about it. We had fellows come who talked about what we would see in France, and they said, well, we were in France last week. We came out. So evidently most of these people were, I'd say, cosmopolitan, because they spoke English, but they had an accent that you couldn't tell what the accent was, whether it was French, German, or what it was. These fellows were multilingual, and evidently they were SOS, what they call them, Office of Strategic Service people,
OSS?
who came back to England from France periodically. And that was our life. We moved around all over England, and the main thing we did was not walk, but run.
So you were just training and preparing for the main
We were-
invasion for D-Day?
That's exactly what we were doing. We went to places where we climbed down nets into makeshift boats, so we knew how to get off the larger ships onto the landing crafts and things like that.
Now, did you get any weekends off or leave time at all during that period?
I'd have to say no, but sometimes when we would come into an area, and usually we were in the country because they didn't want us to get near a city.
Mm-hmm.
If there was a pub down the road, maybe 2 or 3 fellows out of a company were allowed to go in for the weekend. Or I shouldn't say for the weekend, go in for the day on the weekend.
Uh-huh.
But no, there was no leave.
Okay. All right. And what was it like when you got the word that you were going into France?
Well, what happened, we didn't know we were going into France. We were on one of our, I call them forced marches,
Mm-hmm.
and all of a sudden we came to a place where a train was parked in the country.
Mm-hmm.
We all got on the train, and we knew what had happened then because we hadn't been on a train for a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And we went down and went into the staging area where we were re-equipped, and the first fellows were already on the boat ready for the invasion.
Okay.
And what we did, we knew that we were gone because we got new uniforms, and the uniforms were impregnated with something that almost made them feel like plastic. They were ordinary GI uniforms, but they had sprayed them with something, and then they all got a new gas mask, so we knew what that spray was.
Mhm.
It was to keep the gas
I see.
droplets from going through onto you. We all got new battle jackets, and then everybody got the package of sulfa powder to put on their belt, got a package of sulfa pills, got a package of halogen pills, and then we heard that the fellows were on their way to the beaches.
Okay.
And we got on our ships then, and as I recall, and I think I read it just the other day, I was refreshing my memory, that some of us stayed as long as 7 days on the water before we got ashore because the ocean was so
Mhm.
rough. And what happened, the ships all headed for a place they called Piccadilly Circus. Piccadilly Circus was a place in the English Channel where the ships would go, and then they would be directed into the beaches.
Mhm.
And they'd already landed at Omaha, and they were already, as you know, off the beach when we got there.
Okay. So you landed at Omaha
We
too?
landed at Omaha.
Okay.
We were, I should say, I think we were the 5th Division. The 1st and the 29th were the Assault Division. The 2nd Division followed them up a day or so later. Then the 30th, then the 83rd Division, which was us.
So you were D-Day plus 3, was it?
Oh no, probably D-Day plus a week.
Okay.
A week
Okay.
or so.
What was it like landing on Normandy at that point? Was there still a lot of wreckage?
Well,
and-
I'll tell you what happened was that we were on the boat with nothing to eat, and we had the Hindu people who were on the boat made bread for us,
Mhm.
and we had nothing to eat. So we got off the ships onto the landing craft, came into the beach, and believe it or not, the beach master on the part of the beach where we landed was a captain who trained me down in Mississippi.
Mhm.
And when we got off, it was all wreckage. He told us to get down there, there's a truck that's wrecked, pick up something to eat, some rations, and there are K rations and D rations all over the place.
Mhm.
And we hadn't eaten for several days, so we went down, and then he said, get off the beach as fast as you can because the Germans will start to shell you. You see, it took them a very, very long time to get in 3 or 4 miles.
Yeah. Now, at that point, when you hit the beach, did you run into any sort of enemy fire or anything?
No, the beach was
Was secure?
The 1st Division had cleared the beach, and they were up over the hill.
Okay.
They were a mile or 2 inland when we got ashore.
Okay. And when was the first time you were actually under fire?
Well, as I recall, as soon as we got off the beach and got up into the land, every day the Germans would put artillery fire on you.
Okay. Was your unit suffering many casualties at that point?
At that point, no, not many.
Okay. What about snipers or
Oh
small
yes,
arms
snipers
fire?
all over the place. There were snipers in every tree, it seemed like.
Mm-hmm.
What happened was, later on they said that this had to stop because the first casualty, and maybe not the very first, but one of the first casualties we had in our whole regiment was the colonel. he was shot by a sniper. And the reason he was shot is because he had his Jeep ashore, and he got in his Jeep, he had a driver driving his Jeep, and the German snipers would not shoot the driver.
Yeah.
They would shoot the fellow sitting next to him, and they
Yeah.
killed Colonel Barnbauer, probably one of the very first casualties. He didn't hardly get off the beach.
Okay. Now, did you wear any sort of rank or identifications, insignia on your uniforms?
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay.
You mean patches? No,
Yeah.
they were plain, as I say, we picked the uniforms up near Southampton, near Poole, and they were just plain Army uniforms.
Okay. All right. And once you got inland somewhat, did you run into the hedgerows?
Well, you run into the hedgerows as soon as you got off the beach.
Okay. What was it like fighting in the hedgerows?
Well, the hedgerows were something that no one had planned for.
Mm-hmm.
They were absolutely horrendous. And the Germans knew where all the hedgerows were. They had all the roads between the hedgerows. As you can see, this film here looks like what a hedgerow is. As you can see that top one there.
Okay. All right. Got it. All right. And you constantly started moving inland?
We didn't move very far because the hedgerow was about 100 yards beyond the hedgerow you were in. The next hedgerow was 100 yards behind that. And you had to push your way through those hedgerows.
Were they using tanks to break through them?
The Americans were using tanks in places, but what was happening, the tanks would get raised up when they hit a hedgerow, so their soft belly was showing, and the Germans could knock them out. So the Americans were smart enough to put a bulldozer blade on the front, like we use here in Saratoga for winter snow. The tanks come up and hit the hedgerow, hit the hedgerow, and hit the hedgerow, and eventually they break through.
I see.
The things that I remember mainly in the hedgerow were that we'd have to send out patrols every night. We'd send out somebody to listen, and that made it so that you didn't get much sleep. And I can remember almost every night that I was able to sleep. I had my religion was Catholic, and I had my rosary beads, and I had them around my neck, and I'd say my rosary beads and fall asleep before I got past the first decade. And I think that's the thing that we had in common, all of us fellows in our platoon. I don't want to say we're very religious fellows, but there wasn't an atheist in the crowd, is what I'm trying to say, I guess. And there was about almost a third Catholic, 2/3 maybe Protestant, and they all, I don't want to say attended religious service on Sunday. You couldn't do that, but all thought that they were doing the right thing.
What was it like the first time? Well, you mentioned that you were shelled occasionally, and then you were hit with sniper fire. But when the first time you were in actual combat, fighting the Germans, whereabouts was that?
Well, that was right above the beach, not too far in. I can't tell you how many yards or how many miles. It probably wasn't more than a mile. And what happened was our second lieutenant was probably the first one in the platoon to be killed because he was a young college man who thought he was immortal. He got up to run from one hedgerow to the other, and he only made it a few yards. He shouldn't have run. He should have got down and crawled.
Yeah.
He was the first one to go. And we had several machine guns that were hit by mortars, and the fellows there were killed in the first few days because the Germans knew exactly where the hedgerows were. And what we would do at night, we would dig not a foxhole, but dig what we call a slit trench, and then dig it back under the ground and get down in it and lay in it. So when they shelled, the shells would come, hit the trees and come down this way. You would be back here, but if you were in the hole in the slit trench, they could come in and get you.
Yeah.
If you were down and back a little bit, they couldn't get you.
I see.
And that's what we found out we had to do.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very, very nerve-wracking because I did not see it, but one of the fellows got his hand hurt. And when he was out on patrol and he was laying in the woods, and the Germans walked by and stepped on his hand. It was so dark, they didn't see him. And because, as I said, the patrols either went out to try to take a prisoner.
Mm-hmm.
If they didn't go out and take a prisoner, went out to sit and listen. If they didn't go out and sit and listen, they went out just to patrol around and see what was going on.
Uh-huh.
So you see, there weren't too many, about 1/3 of us was sleeping and the other 2/3 were doing something all night.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, the Germans were very smart, but we knew what to do. They would shoot off rockets that would burst in the air and blind you. And if you looked at them, you couldn't see for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes anything. But we were smart enough. We had been told, when you hear a pop, look at the ground or close your eyes because you know a rocket's going off. It's like the area up.
Now, were these like parachute flares?
I would say they were like parachute because I like 4th of July. They floated down, but they were very bright.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And how long were you in that area for?
Well, I was a very lucky fella. I lasted almost 3 weeks before the Germans caught me.
Okay. So, do you want to tell how that transpired?
Well, it was a morning. We had nothing to eat.
Mm-hmm.
I had a D-bar that I was eating around lunchtime, and I was sitting with my back to a hedgerow, which I thought was perfectly safe. But evidently there was a German on the other side or somewhere very close who threw what I thought was a potato masher. You know what that is. It's a hand grenade on a stick.
Yeah.
And evidently it landed right almost between my legs and blew up the rifle I had and knocked me out. Well,
Were you wounded at all besides being knocked unconscious?
Yes.
Okay.
I evidently was, I'll tell you a little bit about it later, I evidently was knocked out in a lot of the fragments, but lucky, a potato masher does not have a lot of heavy pieces of shrapnel. It's light, mainly explosive. Usually the Germans come over when you're knocked out and shoot you. But what happened, I was knocked out, I did have some shrapnel. I got up and started to go back to the next hedgerow. And I don't know whether it was somebody shot me or whether it was a piece of heavy artillery shrapnel went through my knee and I went down again. And I laid there for I don't know how long, probably a half an hour. Finally, when I came all the way to, I took my canteen and started to drink some water and take my sulfa pills. And I looked around for a little bit of the sulfa powder I had on some wounds I had, but nothing was real catastrophic. So I crawled back the next half hour or so to the next hedgerow, and when I went over the hedgerow, I evidently passed out a little while. I came to, and a fellow from our mortar platoon who was back a couple of hedgerows, Sergeant Leszewski, came, and he picked me up and called for somebody else, and the two of them carried me on their shoulders. At the same time, artillery fire was coming in on that mortar position, and the artillery shell hit, and they dropped me again, and they hit me again. Bottom of my feet, believe it or not, I had. Then they called for another fellow. 3 of them came, and they were carrying me back to the next hedgerow, and the artillery shells were coming in again. And one of them hit, it really blew us all up. It hit Sergeant Leszewski, and I found out later in the shoulder, and I never heard anybody cuss the Germans like he did. And he left. The other 2 fellows carried me back to the aid station. And one of the things that impressed me back at the aid station, because I was pretty groggy, was their efficiency. They had the fellows cutting your clothes off, putting pads wherever you were wounded, and there were a tremendous number of fellows going through the aid station. And the thing I remember most, our chaplain, Father Clauset, who was a French-Canadian from Maine, was there, and he was going around giving last rites to everybody, no matter whether they were Catholic, Protestant, or Jewish, no matter what their dog tags said.
Now, did they try to remove any of the shrapnel, or they just...
Well, what they did, at the time, they gave me a shot of morphine, and I got kind of groggy. But they did do a lot of bandaging. I don't know exactly what they did do, but I do remember that they put me on a Jeep with 4 of us on the Jeep, 2 on the front, 2 on the back, and away we went to what was equivalent to the MASH hospital. And one of the reasons that I felt real good there was my mother and my aunt were very religious people. It said they were going to offer a novena for me, and I'd never ever die before seeing a priest. And there was Father Clauset. But anyways, they got me back to the MASH hospital, and I sit out there, or laid out there. You know what a MASH hospital is?
Yes.
And what happened, we laid there for I don't know how many hours, and I do remember taking me in, and the doctor was there, and the nurse put the needle in my arm, and the doctor, and I was stripped down. All I had was my dog tags and my rosary beads on my neck and nothing else. And I do remember him saying, "Well, soldier," he says, "it looked like you got a one-way ticket home." What happened then, I went out, and the next thing I remember, the next morning, I was laying out with maybe 100 other fellows, all just on the ground. And what happened was, I didn't know it started to rain a little bit. They had us covered with tarpaulins or blankets. And the doctors would come out, and the nurses would come out, and they would check people, and then if they were dead, I found out later, they'd put the tarp over them, and the grave registration would carry them away. And I woke up, and I had a tarp on me, and I threw it off. And I guess I did it several times, and one of the medics came by and said, "Leave that on." And I said, "I don't want anybody to mistake me for being dead and carry me away." It was something very serious then, but now it's comical. And they said, "It's raining, and we don't want you blankets to get all wet," because we were all covered with blankets. Almost everybody was completely naked. And they took us down that afternoon to the beach, and we laid on the beach, Omaha Beach, for several hours. And the LST, the tankers, would come in, the tanks would come off, the boats would be up on the sand. And then the next high tide, they were floating, they would have their anchor out, so they would pull them back off the sand. And what happened was that we had to wait there until high tide, and then the next morning we woke up, we were in England, and I had a cast on my left hand, I had a cast on my right leg, my foot, I had a bandage from my hip down to my toes, I had a patch over my eye, I had a patch on my shoulder, my rear. The only thing I have is my right eye and my right hand, and it had a couple little bandages on it when I got to England.
So you had a lot of shrapnel?
I had shrapnel all over. In fact, today I still have a lot in me. In fact, I have a bad knee, and the doctor took some x-rays of the knee, and he showed us the x-ray. And we counted 7 pieces about as big as a Navy being right in the knee area, still there.
Wow.
And I remember that when we got to a hospital in England, they looked at my eye, fixed it up, and it was all right, they said. Later on it started to swell, and I was telling them, "Oh, it hurts so bad." But what happened was that they had ordinary doctors looking at it, and they said, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with it, we can't see anything." But after about 3 days, it started to swell, like pink eye. And they took me down to an ophthalmologist, and he took a piece of shrapnel out. And my ophthalmologist now says there's still a floating piece of shrapnel in my left eye. So I was really beat up, and I was 5 months in the hospital in England. I never got sent back home. It took me a long time to get to the point where I could walk. But one of the things that did happen, it was kind of like a vacation for me. When I got so I could walk with a cane, they would allow me to take a pass and go to London for 3 or 4 days. I was in a hospital out in Devon, which is all the way across, but they had high-speed trains that get you to London in about 4 hours or so. And I remember that I was in London, I could walk around with my cane and stay at Piccadilly Circus. They had places where soldiers could sleep all night. And I was there when the first V2 came over, because nobody knew what had happened. It came over silently. It wasn't like a buzz bomb where you got bub, 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 bub. It just came silently and blew up not too far from where I was. And I couldn't walk too well, but I really hurried to get down in the subway with all the rest of the people.
How were you treated by the English people?
We were treated very well. We can't complain at all. I can say that in London, I went to the Salvation Army to eat one day, and they were giving out wool sweaters, and they gave me a wool sweater. Of course, it was in October then, and I put that sweater on and wore it the rest of the time that I was in Europe. It was a tremendously nice sweater from the Salvation Army in England.
Mm-hmm. What was the English food like?
Well, if you like fish and chips, it was great, and I like fish and chips. But the food that we had was all American from the hospitals that we were in.
Okay. Now you said you spent 5 months in the hospital.
Well, let's see. I spent from the 6th of July to around approximately Thanksgiving, a little maybe the end of November. July, August, September, October, November, almost 5 months.
Okay. Did you have to undergo any more operations along the way?
Well, they had one doctor came down the first week I was in the hospital every day and took little pieces of shrapnel out of my hands and my arms and my rear, I hate to say my rear end, because I was hit on the bottom, the top, the front, and the back when those fellows were carrying me. And the big thing about it was that my left knee had the nerves severed by this bullet that went through. Luckily, it didn't take too much of the bone out. And I couldn't walk very well because I had no feeling in the leg. And what they did several times, they took me down to the operating room where they put needles in my spine to stimulate the nerves. And when they hit the nerves with I think it was something like Novocaine, they said, your leg would just feel like it was on fire. But when I went back to my outfit, I still could walk, but I couldn't run very well.
Yeah. Any idea why they didn't send you home?
I know why they didn't send me home. Infantry troops were a premium. They didn't have enough infantry troops in Europe. That was the big problem.
So you think if you had been in any other field, you would have been shipped back to the States?
Right home, yes.
Interesting.
That is one of the reasons why when I left Fort Hays in Columbus, Ohio to go down to Mississippi, they cleaned out the whole center there. And I had spent about 3 weeks or so taking tests. I thought I was going to get into one of their college programs, and when I ended up in Mississippi, they said, well, this is what we need, young fellows like you, 18, 19, 20, 21. We don't need any older fellows because they usually can't make it physically. And one of the things that happened was that I later found out, when Vernon and I went back to the 50th anniversary, that the average age of the American soldier in June in Normandy was 22 years old, which is quite young. The average age of the German soldier was 32. And we believe that's true because we went to the cemeteries, and in the German cemeteries, the birthday of most of the soldiers was back 1915, 1910, 1913, in there, so it made them somewhere around 30 years old. The Americans were all in the early 20s.
Okay, after your 5 months of rehabilitation at the hospital, you went back to your unit?
They sent me back to my same unit, same squad.
How many guys were left from your old squad?
Well, this is what I wanted to tell you. I had my notes here. I told you there were 39 in our platoon that left England for France. When the war was over, there were 2 that were originally there. I was there and Benny Cease was there. I had been in the hospital, and I think Benny had been in the hospital twice. So I'm not saying all of them were killed. Most of them were killed, but most of them, I shouldn't say most of them, a lot of them were wounded and sent home, never come back. But that was pretty much 100%.
Okay. Now, when did you get back to your unit? What time period was that?
Well, it was probably the last of November, the 1st of December. I came back because they were in the Hurricane Forest. I don't know whether you've heard of the Hurricane Forest or not.
Yeah.
But they were in the Hurricane Forest, and that was a real fiasco there. The 83rd Division was put in to replace the 4th Division, which got cut up pretty badly. And the thing I remember of the Hurricane Forest is that we would try to get into these little towns of Gay and Strauss, which was near Durham, and you could see the cathedral in Cologne. This was before the Battle of the Bulge. And the Germans would push us back, then we would push them back. We just and they were fighting like they never fought before, because the Battle of the Bulge, they knew about it, we didn't know about it. And I'll say this, that our division commander was real smart. He had 2 regiments that were down on line. One was always in reserve because the Germans were using aircraft more than they'd used any time during the war in the rear. They thought maybe they were going to drop paratroopers. And what happened one night, we got into Strauss, and Benny Cease, he was the platoon sergeant, and had a platoon up on the 2nd floor of a building. Down the street, you could look out the windows, you could see the tank coming. The tank commander was looking out the top of the tank. Infantry were going from door to door. Benny says, get out of the way. He went back across the room. He said, I'm going to take the tank commander out. And he knew enough not to go near the window where they could see the flash or see the smoke from his rifle. He shot across the room, down the street, a half a block, quarter of a block. He must have hit that fellow right between the eyes, because looking out the window, you could see him drop down. The Germans pulled him down and put the tank in reverse, back down the street, and all the infantry started to go back down. They didn't know what was going on, which probably saved us, because the tank knew where we were. He had leveled the building.
Sure.
So, and Benny was, and I should say this, that Benny eventually got to be the platoon sergeant, and we did not have a platoon commander or lieutenant because they got killed too fast. And most of the time, Benny ran this platoon, and he knew how to run it. And there was a few fellows like myself who were old enough and had our wits about us, knew how to keep our head down, and we survived.
Now, basically, it sounds like you were cut off from the rest of the division.
Well, the rest of the regiment. You mean in Gay and Strauss?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, how were you resupplied, or were you just basically living off the land?
You were living off the land. And what happened was that this was getting very, very close to December 16th, when the Battle of the Bulge started. Very close. And that's the reason the Germans were fighting so fiercely there. So what happened is that it was just a continual back and forth, and we were trying to get to Durham. If you look at the map, Durham, and the next town over is Cologne. The Battle of the Bulge came right after that, but this was a tremendous fight in the Hürtgen Forest.
Okay, you want to tell us about what it was like during that time period in combat?
It was very bad because you had some snow in the forest. You had mainly cold rain, so everything was wet and everything was cold, and you had no food. Once in a while somebody could make it back and bring some K rations up. But it was very hard living for those 2 weeks that I was there in the Hürtgen Forest.
Did you have adequate clothing? Did you have rubber boots?
Well, we had our regular combat boots, which were the leather boots. No, we did not have any, as you would say, rubber boots. We did have overcoats, and we did have, I had that nice wool jacket from the English, Salvation Army, yes. And it was very good. One of the things that I remember was that the Battle of the Bulge started the 16th, and it was very close to probably the 18th or 19th that we packed up and left that area, and British troops came down and took over the area, and we left for the Battle of the Bulge.
Okay, you want to tell us about the Battle of the Bulge?
Well, as I remember, we left and we headed for Rockford. I may not pronounce that right, in Belgium. And as we left, we were in the 331st Infantry Regiment, which was the last one to leave because we were the furthest one into Germany. The first 329th, as I recall, left several days before we did in trucks. They ended up in Rockford. The Germans passed Rockford. Rockford was a town like Bastogne. And what happened was one of the companies was in Rockford, and they lost communication with them because their batteries went dead in their radios, and they thought they were wiped out. But when the rest of the regiments got to the area of Rockford, and it was about the furthest that the Germans came, they found these fellows were all in the cellars of the house. The Germans couldn't take the town, and they were surviving, and they had, I can't remember the exact number, like a dozen or so casualties, but nobody was killed. And that was as far as the Germans got. But the thing I do remember, on Christmas Day, we did have a hot meal. We were in trucks, ready to get in position to drive down into the Bulge, and they told us, you will be able to get something hot to eat today because the trucks are going to pass a place where the kitchens are set up. So we stopped, and we went and got a hot meal. And the people who were running the hot meal said, over in the field over there, Father Cossette is going to say Mass today, on Christmas Day it was. And what happened, some of us, Sergeant Leszewski had come back, we all went over, and he had just left. It was just a big field there full of snow. And they said, we can stay here because I can't remember his name, the Protestant chaplain's going to have a service. So we all just sit down on a log there and pulled out our rosary beads and started to say our prayers on Christmas Day. And that's how we spent Christmas Day. We had a hot meal, snow in the beat the van, and we didn't even think a thing about the cold. But then we got down and we started to attack. The 3rd and the 2nd Armored Divisions were forming a corps under General Collins, and the 83rd and 84th Infantry Divisions were supporting them, and they were to drive south towards where Patton was coming up from the south. And that is when we spent 10 days continuously going forward. The tanks would take the field. As soon as we get in the forest, the infantry would clean the Germans out. It was a very, very hard go, and it was down below freezing. And what would happen at night sometimes, we would go to the tankers and say, if you tell us before you move the tank, we'll protect your tanks, and we can climb under the tanks. Most tanks have a place where you can escape the bottom. Climb under them, and they run the engine every half hour or so it wouldn't freeze up, and keep warm. So we protect their tanks at night because all of the troops were not going at the same time. As soon as you got your objective, the next group came through you. And this is very interesting because we pulled into the little town of Bovany, and the Germans just took off when we came in. We didn't even have to, I don't think we shot any of them. Moved in. We went in the barn. We went to sleep. 50 years later, Vernon and I went over to Normandy, and we said when we went to Normandy, we had to go back. I have to go back and see the Battle of the Bulge, see some of those areas. We went back to Bovany, and we looked around, and I said, well, the little village only has 1 or 2 barns, but it had an inn in it. Let's go to the inn. We went to the inn. We stayed in the inn that night, and when we went to dinner that night, a young man came out, and he was the chief cook there. His mother and father owned the inn. And he said, why are you here? You could speak English very well. And we told him that I came through that town during the Battle of the Bulge, slept in a barn. We just wanted to see what it was like. And he left. 5 minutes later, he came back with his grandmother. He said, this is my grandmother. She was in that barn cellar with my father and my aunts and uncles when the Americans came in, and she remembers the Americans coming in, chasing the Germans out of town. They all went in the barn, and they went to sleep in the straw with the horses and the cows. And she was so excited. It was very interesting because we sit there, she could not talk, but he was an interpreter. We sit there from right after supper, it was almost midnight, talking about what had gone on.
Now, did you get to go back to the barn? Was that?
Oh yeah, we saw the area there, the town was, nothing, just a couple houses. They all were brick or stone, and we got to see the area there. And they wanted us to stay a couple days and show us around where I had been in that area, but we had a schedule. We had to be in Switzerland in a week to see some of her relatives, so we couldn't stay.
Now, did you go back into the barn?
No, we didn't go into the barn. You know, a barn in Belgium is not like a barn that you see here. The barn is made out of sandstone, brick, and mortar. It's not wood.
Oh, I see.
It's more like a permanent building. Did you have something you wanted to say?
That tape was the Belgian tape they sent you.
Yeah, the tape will show a lot of things.
Some of the photos.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, did you suffer from frostbite or anything?
Well, I was lucky. I had an extra pair of socks. I had 2 pairs of socks on, 1 pair of cotton and 1 pair of wool.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a 3rd pair that I kept on my shoulders, put inside my jacket so that my body would warm the socks and dry them. And every time I had a chance, somewhere like that barn, I'd take my shoes off, rub my feet, put the new socks on, and then head south.
Mm-hmm.
And it was very interesting because there were a tremendous number of people who were frostbitten. They lost their toes.
Mm-hmm.
The Battle of the Bulge was a very, very hard place because not only were the Germans the very best troops that the Germans had the very best troops and the very worst troops in the Battle of the Bulge. They had the SS and a lot of the experienced troops from the Russian front, and then they filled in with what they called Volkssturm, which were young kids that they gathered up.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on who you were up against as to what kind of situation you had. And I can remember many times that the Volkssturm would come in and surrender, but the SS would not. And I maybe should mention the fact that I think my closest experience on being killed was in the Battle of the Bulge, because at the time they had promoted me to a corporal. And one of the things I had to do was to go out ahead of the machine gun squad and find a place to put a machine gun.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you get ahead of everybody, you know, the first person through is the one the Germans are going to shoot at.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened was that the Battle of the Bulge was well on, and I have a picture here showing. If you can see this picture right here, these people moving out, I'm out ahead of that. That's an actual picture that I was in, the bottom one.
Okay. Okay. All right, got
Okay?
it. Yep.
That's the way we go through the woods. And what happened was that there was a German machine gun that started to spray the area. And as soon as I heard the click and the thing go, I went to the ground, and the tracer bullets came right over my head. One of them hit my helmet and took this little bit of the netting off.
Uh-huh.
And the snow, as you can see there, was probably a foot deep, and I just hugged the ground as tight as I could. And I just stayed there, and probably 5 minutes later, Benny Cease came by, and he was crawling, and he said, "I thought they got you." And I said, "They'd come darn close, but they didn't." He said, "I sent a squad around to the side to come in." And he said, "They'll be gone in a couple of minutes." And then you heard the firing. The Germans took off.
Mm-hmm.
And what happened, he said, "I want you to help me carry Nipper back." Nipper was a young fellow. When I say young fellow, he was only 18. And here we were 20, and he was a young fellow. And he said, they caught him, and evidently they caught him in the leg. So Benny and I crawled back, and we tried to move him, and he kept screaming. He says, "Just let me here, let me die," because he was hurt very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember I pulled out my package of morphine syringes. Everybody carried, that were in combat, could get morphine syringes, little tubes. But I don't ever remember anybody ever using them to get higher on. No, I can honestly say no one ever used them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember the first time that I used them, he was laying there, and I pulled his sleeve up and I shoved it into his arm, squeezed it, and then took it like they told us and bent it around his collar so the medics would know he had it, wouldn't overdose him.
Yep.
And after about 5 minutes, he was pretty groggy, and the two of us pulled him all the way back to where some of the medics could take him on.
Mm-hmm.
And you might say, well, you say, is that a heroic act? No, it isn't. It's just, he would do the same thing for me.
Mm-hmm. Do you know if he survived?
I have no idea, because I don't think I think he survived. He was not hit that bad. It was just one bullet in his leg, and I think maybe it broke a bone or something, the reason it hurt so bad. But he was not losing blood profusely.
Okay.
But that was the closest I came, and I want to try to bring that helmet home. Do you think they'd allow me to bring it? No.
How long were you involved in the bulge before? You
Well,
were
I can't
pulled back.
remember. The bulge was was officially over when we left.
Mhm.
And the thing I'd like to say is that when I left the hospital in England, I had a uniform on. And that was the first part of, well, let's say the last of November.
Mhm.
And I never changed that uniform until the bulge was over, which was approximately sometime in the middle of January, almost a month and a half, 2 months, wore the same uniform. People said, how could you stand yourself? Well, what the Army gave you was what they call DDT powder that you sprinkle all over you. I don't know if you've heard of that or not.
Sure.
You took the DDT powder under your arms and around your stomach and just patted your uniform with it and shook it. And so at the end of the bulge, we were taken to a coal mine in Belgium where they had places that the miners took showers when they come out of the mines, and we were given a shower then.
Did you get clean uniforms at that point?
Oh yes, yes, we got clean. Well, one more thing about the bulge that I could say, I noticed in there, you talk about people and their actions. One of the things that I do remember, one night when we were in the Battle of the Bulge, near Langleer, the German artillery was shelling, our artillery was shelling them. We came through the woods and we caught a tank. The Germans had left it, the infantry had run away. And nobody had a thermite grenade. You know what a thermite grenade is? Nobody had a thermite grenade. And the tank was in the woods and we surrounded it, but we couldn't knock it out. I can remember one fellow shoving his rifle in the track, which just got chewed up. And I went to the back of it, and I took my hands, and somebody else took their hands, put them over the exhaust, and the exhaust just pushed your hands off, and we couldn't knock the tank out.
Mhm.
Because at other times I've seen fellows, and I never did, take a thermite grenade and throw down the barrel of the tank. And what happens, the thermite grenade will cause everything to fuse. Then if they try to fire the cannon, it'll blow up.
Yeah.
So it was very interesting things that we did in the Battle of the Bulge. The thing I remember when I decided that Bernard and I were going to go over definitely to see the 50th anniversary, what we did, I read a lot of books. And John Keegan, and maybe you read some of his books, an English war historian.
No, I haven't.
Well, he evidently was very good on World War II because he was just at that age. And he lined up 6 battles that he said more or less determined the way Western European and American civilization were guided.
Mm-hmm.
He said the first one was the Battle of Trafalgar, where Lord Nelson defeated the Spanish Armada.
Mm-hmm.
He said the next one was the Battle of Waterloo, where Wellington defeated Napoleon. The third one was the Battle of Gettysburg, where the North kept the Confederacy from taking Washington. The fourth one was the Battle of Stalingrad, where it was a high point for the Germans in Russia. And then they were driven back. The fifth one was the Battle of Normandy, and the sixth one was the Battle of the Bulge.
Mm-hmm.
The reason he had the Battle of the Bulge in there because it was primarily all American, and there were close to 1 million people on each side, just under 1 million people on each side total for that battle, one of the biggest ones. And I was telling Vernon, I was in 2 of them.
Now, once you were pulled back, and obviously you were given some sort of rest, and you were able to be resupplied.
Oh yes.
Were you given any kind of break or leave or anything?
Yes, this is very interesting. You know, the reason the Battle of the Bulge started is because the Americans had divisions there that were just fresh off of the boat.
Mm-hmm.
And they put them in a place where they should never put them, and they never gave them enough reconnaissance to know the Battle of the Bulge were coming. Well, they were resupplied, and they took over and held the line. other divisions like the 83rd, the 84th, the 2nd and 3rd Armor, all went back to get resupplied and reclothed. And they said, anybody who has any money, we're going to run some trucks into Paris, can go into Paris, but you have to have some money. You can't go in there without any money. And in our platoon, you know how many fellows had money?
Just you?
I had all my money sent home to my mother and put in the bank, but she had sent me some money in a letter periodically, like $1, $5 or something, and I had them, so I got to go to Paris for 3 days, and it was very interesting. Maybe shouldn't say this, but Bernard knows it. I went down to the supply sergeant, which was one of the old boys. He never got hurt, so he was always there. And I said, Red, I've gone to Paris and I need some cigarettes. And so he gave me, I think, 2 cartons, maybe 1 carton, 2 cartons. So I put those in my bag and headed for Paris on the truck. When I got off the truck, we went to the place where we were going to stay that night. And I met another fellow there and we talked. He said, you got cigarettes? I said, I got some too. He said, let's go out and sell them. I said, sure. We went right down the Champs-Élysées and we pulled them out of our pocket. We put them under our arm. We were walking. Somebody came up to him. He could speak French a little bit. And he said, fellow wants to find me. He says, don't sell them to him. He's not offering us enough. We kept walking. 2 or 3 offers, French people coming up. Finally, he said, okay, this is the fun. We handed them. They handed us the francs. We had a good time.
Now, did you smoke?
That was in addition to the $5 I had.
Were you a smoker?
No, that's one thing about it. I can say this. They gave us cigarettes all you wanted. In our platoon, there were many more non-smokers than smokers. Very few fellows smoked. Most of them were, as I say, young. They hadn't picked the habit up yet. And so far as drinking is concerned, there were very few that really got what you would say drunk. They did like to take a drink of French wine. And I was a non-drinker, but I used to like to take just a sip of the champagne. We had a medic we called Doc Martin, and he was almost a borderline alcoholic. He was assigned to us. And when he would go into some of the French places where they had wine, he would taste it, and he would only bring out the very best. They give it to you. And Doc Martin, I remember so many times come up and he called me Dobby. He said, hey Dobby, he says, I just want you to taste this wine, taste this champagne. It is the driest I've ever had. You put it in your mouth and it won't even wet your lips. But we finished the Battle of the Bulge and then we prepared to go across Germany. And one of the, in here you ask us what was an amusing thing that happened. I can say one of the most amusing things that happened was that we were transferred up to the 9th Army, that was right south of the British and Canadian armies, to go across the northern plains of Germany. And what happened was our Corps had 3 infantry divisions, the 29th, the 30th, the 83rd, and the 2nd Armored Division, all from Normandy, all crack divisions. We started to go to the Rhine River, and our regiment was the first regiment to reach the upper Rhine. The fellows got on the bridge, but the Germans blew the bridges. So we stopped right at the river. On the river there were many warehouses, and these warehouses were full of French wine, champagne, which the Germans had moved. Artillery was on both sides of the Rhine, hit those warehouses, and knocked out a lot of the bottles, and they broke. Knocked a lot of the kegs, they broke. So the bottom of the place was just full of Tutti Frutti. But Doc Martin went in, picked up a few bottles of what he considered very, very vintage champagne, brought them to the house. We went in the house. Of course, we posted guards out that night. We drank and found bread and cheese, and we sit there and we had a good party. But what happened, we heard noise. So fellas, when somebody's up the street, we have to see who it is. So we got a squad, went up the street. There was a GI with a Jeep, and he had a hose like firemen use when they put it in the pond to suck water. And he was filling 5-gallon cans out of that Tutti Frutti fine stuff in the bottom. Just filling them and taking them back. You heard that the GIs like something to drink. Well, that's what they were taking. They were taking this wine, putting it in 5-gallon cans and putting it on a Jeep and taking it
Oh
away.
my gosh.
It's unbelievable, but it's true. Because you probably heard that the Germans took a lot of the vintage wines and things from France and moved them back into Germany. And the other thing that comes to my mind right now, this is completely different about our trip over the 50th anniversary. Vernon and I went to, what's the name? Bayou, I think is the way you pronounce it. The Canadians liberated Bayou. It was right near the Normandy coast. And they had the tapestry. Maybe you've heard of the Bayou Tapestry.
Oh yes,
They had the tapestry that we went in to see. When we went in to see it on the 50th anniversary, the people who were the custodians of it told us that during the war they were afraid Hermann Goering would move that to Germany, so they laid it down in the village somewhere in boxes, then piled, was it coal, Werner? Wood and coal, stuff all over, piled up, so it sit there the whole war under there. They said they didn't want the Germans to take it over into Germany.
I gotta stop. Okay, we're rolling again.
Well, one of the things that I probably forgot to tell you about in the Battle of the Bulge, we all had overcoats on top of our battle jackets, and I had that extra wool sweater on, and my overcoat got so cold, and the snow melted and then froze on it. It was so stiff that I just took it off one night and just stuck it in the snow and let it sit there. And I looked at it, it had some holes in it, and I don't know how those holes got in it unless some shrapnel came and got in the bottom when I was wearing it. But I just left it lay there, and I finished the rest of the bulge with just my battle jacket on and my 2 wool sweaters, the one the Army gave me and the one the Salvation Army gave me, because that coat was so stiff that I couldn't wear it. We were very ill-equipped for the Battle of the Bulge when it came to clothes. And I still think that if they would have let General Patton loose in France, we wouldn't have had the Battle of the Bulge.
Now, how did your weapons work in that extreme cold like that? Did you have any problems?
Well, as I said, we had no problems with our M1 rifles, and our machine guns worked fairly well. But as I said, the tanks that we would get under to get warm had to be run every few hours. And I wasn't a tanker, I don't know, but they said if they didn't run them, the engines may not start, because most of them had, as I understand it, derivatives of aircraft engines. They weren't first-class diesel engines. Well, one of the things that you were telling me what?
Fish.
Oh, one of the things that I haven't mentioned because I haven't come to it yet, when you were talking about did we have enough to eat? One of the things that happened after we got across the river Rhine and started to head for Berlin, they brought fuel, they brought ammunition, and they brought food up. Well, you can see food was at the bottom of the list. And what happened, we went for weeks with no supplies of food, and we have to live off the land. Well, we were very ingenious. When you come to a farm, the farm always had chickens, and we had a fellow we call Miller's chickens. We could catch chickens and give them to Miller. He could butcher them, and he always could find a pot of grease somewhere. He'd put his chickens in the grease, and he only served legs and breast, no other parts, no wings, not enough meat. But then we found out that most of those farms had fish ponds. So we were all carrying at least a quarter pound of TNT on our belts. So we take maybe 4 of those quarter pounds, put a fuse in it, tape them up, put a long fuse, throw them in the pond. They would go down, and maybe a half a minute later, they like a mini atom bomb. Well, there's always a boat or something around. We go out there and we just get it up to fish. They'd all be floating on the top. And that's how we had fish, several times a week as we went across Germany. And I don't know who originated that idea, but somebody told us about it. You know, we had a lot of fellows in our outfit was in the Midwest for farmers. You can stun fish and they'll come right to the top. We had fish several times a week by finding a fish pond in the farm.
Now, do you recall your reaction when you heard about the death of President Roosevelt?
Well, you know, I can't remember any real reaction on it, but I remember most of the people. So, who is President Truman? He was not well known. But the thing that I'll tell you about happened, we had taken off right below the Canadian and British armies, and we were in the 9th American Army. We had the 2nd Armored Division, which was the lead division, hell on wheels. It was the best tank division in Europe, I think. We had the 29th, the 30th, and the 83rd Infantry Division started across. All three of those landed in June in Normandy. They all were well equipped and started. And they kept up with the 2nd Armored Division. And we were going to cross much faster than headquarters thought we were going to, because we passed a lot of places and left the people behind us to clean them up. And when we got to the Elbe River, way ahead of where the Russians were at the other side of Berlin, we crossed the Elbe River at Barbie, the 83rd Infantry. The 2nd Armored Division crossed at Magdeburg. The Germans sent all their SS troops up. The 2nd Armored Division withdrew, came down, went across with us, and we built a real good bridge there. And they put nets across it so the Germans couldn't send floats down with dynamite on to blow the bridge up. And then when we started to head for Berlin, we got as far as Zerbst, and I guess headquarters found out where we were with the 2nd Armored Division, and they said, well, you're not supposed to go beyond the Elbe River, because they were negotiating who was going to take Berlin. We thought we should take it, and we were crazy. Maybe we'd all been killed, maybe we wouldn't have. But what happened was, they were ordered to get back across that bridge. Well, some engineers got some big signs and put President Truman Memorial Bridge across the Elbe, took pictures, got all the people in the news up there to take pictures of it. I guess they sent some back home. Who's going to tear down President Truman's bridge? And the bridge still stayed, and they made us come back from where we were in Zerbst back. As I showed you here, they were within 36 miles of Berlin at the time, come back a little ways and sit there until the war was over, sit there 3 weeks while the Russians took.
Now, did you get, eventually you met up with the Russians?
I personally didn't know, but some of our outfit did.
Okay.
What happened was that when we went across that bridge, we were across there in regimental strength. We had quite a force across there, and I can remember, maybe you heard in your talk to people about Admiral Halsey saying, when the war was over, we got to go out and give one more bloody nose to the Japs before it's over. Well, we had a colonel who was like that. He said, we got to get down and give one more slap to the Germans before this is over, because we knew we weren't going to Berlin. So I don't remember exactly whether it was voluntary or whether I don't think he ordered everybody. He said, we're gone. And we went down to this town beyond Zerbst. And what happened was that it was just full of SS troops and other Germans who weren't ready to give up. And we didn't have any artillery, any tank. We just had jeeps and machine guns and rifles. And I guess we just shot at them. They shot at us for a few hours, and then we went back. He thought he'd get down there and blow them up, but he didn't have any artillery or any support.
Now, what was it like when you heard that Germany surrendered? Was there a lot of celebration?
Not much.
No?
Not much. We were just kind of glad it was over.
Now, were there any rumors floating around that you'd be heading for Japan next?
No.
No?
The reason there weren't any rumors around, before the rumors came out, they had a point system. Have you heard of the point system?
Oh, yes.
They had a point system. And you add up your points, so many points for every month overseas, so many points for every month in the Army, so many points. But the kicker was a Purple Heart. If you had the Purple Heart, you almost had enough points. You knew you weren't going anywhere. And so most of the fellows that were old ones like me that came through Normandy had the Purple Heart and had enough points that they knew they weren't going.
Mm-hmm.
There were a few of the young ones they took out and sent back. But I don't remember how many points the Purple Heart was worth. And some of the fellows were saying, well, that's not really worth because I landed in Normandy and I come all the way here and I never got shot, so I had to go over there. It was theoretical that some people could have that experience.
Now, once the war actually ended, where did you go next? Did you stay in Germany for a while, or did you?
What we did, we stayed in the Harz Mountains for, I don't remember how many weeks. You know, the Harz Mountains are in central Germany. Then we got on our trucks and we went down to Bavaria, down near Passau in Bavaria, and we stayed in Bavaria probably June, July, August, September, before we were sent home. And it was quite nice to spend the summer down there. We didn't do much of anything except fall out for roll call in the morning, and then
How were you received by the German people?
well, down in Bavaria, I think that we were received quite well. Of course, you were not allowed to fraternize with them. You're not allowed to socialize with them at all.
Oh, okay.
But they were not hostile. Up in northern Germany, when the war was on, a lot of them were very hostile. And one of the things that happened, when we would go into a town, usually the company commander would go in and ask, where is the Burgermeister? And usually the Burgermeister would not try to hide. He was proud of being the Burgermeister. But as soon as he got hold of him, he'd tell him, you're responsible for this town. If anything happens, I'm coming after you. And that's something that we haven't learned yet. So the Burgermeister would run the town, but the company commander would run the Burgermeister. And it worked.
Okay.
One of the things that I didn't mention going across northern Germany, we would go into a lot of the, I call them the train stations, and of course we had nothing to eat or nothing to drink, we had to find it, and the fellows found out if you go into train stations and you go down down the bottom, they usually had barrels of beer. And if you connected the beer up to the spigots, you could all have a glass of beer. But one of the things that I haven't mentioned to you, you mentioned here that who are the people that you most remember from the experience in the war? And I have a list. Do you mind if I read it?
No, not at all.
One of them that I have to say that the first one that I remember, of course, I always remember being real close to General Patton, seeing him. Not close to him in being close, but seeing him because he did have a voice that wasn't anything like the movie that they made. And the next one was Sergeant Leszewski. He was the fellow who carried me back, probably saved my life. The next one was Benny Cease. He's the fellow who made that tremendous shot. The next one is Father Clauset, because he was a little fellow, probably in his 40s, horrible shape, and yet he was right up there with the fellows. I can remember when we got off of the large boat on the landing craft, we had to step down the net, step into it. I said to myself, if that fellow can do it, I can do it easy. And the last one I remember was Joe Meadus. Joe was the fellow that I met after the Battle of the Bulge. He came as a replacement. He was a very nice fellow. He didn't smoke. He liked to have a glass of wine. He was a very, I don't want to say religious fellow, but a very fellow of faith. And he was tremendous physical condition. He was the one fellow that probably beat up on me. And he and I were the best friends. And when the war was winding down, we lost very few people after we crossed the Rhine until we got to where we were near Berlin. And he was one. What happened, we came into a small village, and as you probably remember from Europe, all the country roads have big trees when they're out in the fields or over here. The Germans knocked the trees down, cut them down there across the road. We knew not to go in the fields, it was mined. So we would go through the trees. And you have to look because they would put wires there to trip personnel mine.
Yeah.
I was walking down in no hurry because the Germans had gone out of town. All of a sudden, the darndest boom you ever heard. And I looked over there. Somebody said that Joe tripped a wire, and I went over to see and said, "Don't go over there." The wire just blew him apart, and I never did get to see him. Evidently, he was killed by the mine. It was on the trees. When he hit the wire, the mine went off and got him.
Yeah. Now, when you did go back, finally went home, did you go back basically with your platoon or?
No, what happened was that they had cigarette camps
Mm-hmm.
in the Har, Cherbourg, and other places, and they were trying to ship the people back, like the ones that had, at first the ones that went back were the ones that were gone to Japan.
Yeah.
We were there. Then they started to ship people back at random, I think, depending on how many points they had. So you just left, picked your bag up, had your orders, and went to the harbor and got on the next ship.
Mm-hmm. How long was that ship going back to the States? How long did it take?
You know, I often try to remember. I think it was something like 7 days, but it took more time coming back than normally would take because the ship was loaded.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what happens in the North Atlantic in between June and November?
Mm-hmm.
We got into one of those. And the ship had to turn and go a different direction because it was a good sized ship. I don't remember the name of it, but it just was gone up and down it was gone sideways and they wanted to go up and down. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The ships will roll too much if they're gone in the wrong direction. So it took an extra day or so. And what happened was that they had everything to eat on there, but nobody was eating. And I was in great shape because I had come across without no trouble. I had gone across the channel when we went to the invasion.
Mm-hmm.
It was as rough as a cob, and I had not gotten sick at all. Some of the fellows were just happy to get off. They were so sick. I'd gone back across the channel. I'd gone back across another time. And when we got about a day and a half from New York, maybe 2 days in New York, we really got into the rough weather. And I ate. I came out of the dining room and I was walking down. All of a sudden, something hit me like a ball bat in the back of the head, and I let go. And it was amazing. I was seasick then for a day. But when we came up New York Harbor, they told us, don't get on this one side, because everybody got on. The ship actually started to tip a little. It wouldn't tip over, but they told you not to get on the side to look at New York, get on the side, the other side, or get on the front or get on the back. Because the ship probably had 10,000, 12,000 men on it.
Mm-hmm. And what was it like when you got off the ship? Was there a lot of celebrating?
You know, I don't remember. I was in such a hurry to get on the train to go to Indiantown Gap to get out.
Okay. So you were sent to Indiantown Gap and discharged from there before you went home?
Yes.
Okay.
I was sent to Indiantown Gap. I was there several days. And I can't remember. I had a lot of clothes with me. I didn't have my helmet. They got rid of that way back in Europe. But what happened was that when I left there, all I had on was the clothes that I was wearing, and that was it.
Uh-huh.
They made you leave all your clothes there. They put them in a big truck. I don't know what in the world they were going to do with them, why they didn't let the fellows have them.
Yeah. So you were discharged, and where did you go? Home?
I went right home and got home on Sunday evening, as I recall. And one of the things that happened to me within a week or so, we live in the Ohio Valley where there are mountains.
Mm-hmm.
They really aren't big mountains, they're more hills in West Virginia. Tunnels, the trains come through the tunnel. And the steamers, when they come through the tunnel, they do sound something like artillery shells. And I can remember, I was in bed sleeping one night, the windows were open a little bit. I heard that noise, and all I could visualize was the artillery's coming in. I dove out of bed for my slit trench. I hit the wall, went on the ground. Everybody came in. What's the matter? What's the matter? I felt like a fool. I said, oh, I just rolled out of bed. I'm not used to sleeping. It's amazing how things like that happen.
Uh-huh.
And Vernon knows this tale. After we got married, we went to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and we had a small apartment. I worked for
3 years
General
later.
Electric. Pardon?
3 years later.
3 years later, we had a small apartment. The kitchen was very small, but it had an old stove in it, and the stove had a mechanical thermostat. When the thermostat got up to temperature, it goes, you know, not electronic, it made noise. I had never heard it. Vern and I were sitting in the parlor on the couch one night, and she had the stove on. The thing went, I put my arm around her, and we went down on the floor. She said, "What in the world are you doing?" I'm telling you, I just felt so horrible. But that's probably the reason that I'm here today. You're attuned to do things, maybe a couple seconds or a couple fractions parts of a second before you actually need to. And I told her, I thought a machine gun was you hear fellows say that and you say, well, they're crazy. And it happened. It did happen to me. It happened to me.
Now, once you were discharged, did you make use of the GI Bill at all?
Well, when I went home on a Sunday, I think on a Monday, I started to look to get back in school. And I got back in school right after Christmas. I didn't have to wait till the next semester. I went down to Ohio University.
Okay.
And
And what did you get your degree in?
I got a BSE, Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering.
Okay. Did you use that 5220 club at all? It was like an unemployment insurance they gave you?
I don't remember.
Okay.
What happened was that when I went home, my father sent me down to see a fellow named Jay Hipkins, who was in charge of the Disabled American Veterans, which had a room in the Legion. The Legion was big in those days. And he fixed things up with the VA so that I went to school under Public Law 16, not the GI Bill. It was part of the GI Bill, but it was much more, what do I want to say, much more liberal than the GI Bill was.
Okay. Did you join any veterans organizations?
Well, I joined the Legion, I joined the DAV, but the only one that I really kept up with was the DAV. That's the Disabled American Veterans.
Okay.
Because I can remember, I had 30% disability rating in the DAV, and back in 1956 or 7, when Eisenhower was in, they were really working on the veterans and trying to get their ratings all down to save money. And I went over to the VA hospital, they had me report over there, and I didn't realize it, but the DAV came in with their lawyer, they represented me, and they gave me a permanent rating the rest of my life. So they were very, very good for veterans.
Okay. Did you stay in contact with anyone you were in the service with?
Well, really no. Somebody said, don't you fellows who went over there and have a reunion periodically? I said, none of us left. When I told you there were two out of 39.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that if you had attended any sort of reunions of the division or anything.
No.
No.
They do have reunions back in Ohio, because that's originally the division was the Ohio Reserve Division for mainly from Ohio, Indiana, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Kentucky, that area.
Okay. Okay. How do you think your time in the service changed or affected your life?
I think it had a profound effect on my life. And what happened is, you know, when you look back, you can see that a lot of things in your life happen because of chance. You're just on the right place at the right time. But with me, when I look back and I look and see how many times things have been favorable for me, I don't want to say I'm a fanatically religious sort of fellow, because I'm not, but I think that I have a great faith because it's carried me through many times.
Okay.
You see how many times that I could have not been here, and yet I'm here yet. So I think it made me a better person in that respect. And the other thing that I think it did, it made me feel a lot better towards veterans when you see what happens to them. Too many veterans are too low on the totem pole.
And what year did you get married?
1948, in July 14th, 1948, in Bridgeport, Ohio.
Okay. Did you know your wife during the war or after the war?
Well, that's very interesting. We went to the same grade school together,
Uh-huh.
and then she moved to the next town when she was in the 5th grade, 6th grade,
Yes, fifth grade.
next down the river. We never really met, except as maybe as kids.
Mm-hmm.
Then when we went to Ohio University, she was 2 years ahead of me in Ohio University, and that's how we met coming home on the
Oh,
bus
I see.
one time.
Okay. And let me ask you one more question. How did you end up in this part of the country?
Well, I worked for General Electric,
Oh, I see.
and we lived in Fort Wayne for a while, we lived in Erie for a while, and we thought we were going to live in Lynn forever.
Mm-hmm.
But in 1953, the part of General Electric that I worked for moved out of Lynn, moved to Schenectady, and we moved with it. And Verna is a school teacher, so we decided we'd just stay here the rest of our life.
Okay. And you retired from General
We
Electric?
retired from General Electric, and Verna retired from school teaching.
Okay.
And we've been married
Well, must be 60 years.
61 years this July,
Uh-huh.
which is kind of a record for our
Yes.
family.
All right. Well, is there anything else you'd like to touch on before we close?
You know, as I go down this,
Go through your notes and look at them.
no, I think that all these notes that I put down here, we cover them pretty well. As I can say, it was an experience that in the service that I never expected to have, but I never ever thought I'd be in the infantry when I went in the Army.
Mhm.
I thought I'd qualify for some engineering or some others. And I never thought that I'd see what I see what I've seen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never ever thought that right now I could not do the things that I did then. I don't mean physically, I mean emotionally, and because most of the fellows that I was with all had the belief that nothing's going to happen to them.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to happen to somebody else. And they did things, and when you say in here any heroic deeds or anything, every day somebody did them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like some officer I remember said that anybody who come across Omaha Beach should get the Purple Heart automatically. If they didn't get a shot, they were just lucky. But the thing that I thought, when I got the Purple Heart, the colonel came around and gave it to us in the hospital. I thought that you had to be in a hospital. And I thought that after I got out of the Army, because so many people now get it for a scratch. Because I can remember, Vern and I went to Florida a good many years, and we met a fellow down there who was a tanker, Jim Howard. He's gone now. He was in the 3rd Tanker Division, and we worked with them several times. And Jim came across in July 1994, and what happened was that he was a tank commander. He was a little fella,
Mm-hmm.
but he was just ideal for tanks. And he said to me one day, we were talking, he said, you know, he said, I lost, I think it was 2 tanks during the war. Got blown up. I said, what happened to you? He says, oh, he says, the first one, I didn't get hurt at all, I just come out the bottom. He says, second one, he says, the shrapnel got me, but it didn't do too much damage to my arm. He says, I went back to the medics. He says, they put some stitches in, taped it up, going to send me back to England. I said, I don't want to go back to England. I'm all right. I can walk all right. So I left. And I went down and got another tank with my crew, and we joined the fellows and went on. He should have got the Purple Heart. He
Sure.
never did.
Yeah.
And he was just one of many of them. They didn't want to leave their outfit when they got hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And nowadays, people get it because they fall down.
Yeah.
It's degrading. Well, I guess that's about it.
Okay. Oh, let me just ask you one more thing. Did you get to see any USO shows at all when you were overseas?
The only one I remember coming around was Mickey Rooney, but I...
Don't tell it.
Okay, well, want me to tell her? Yeah, I'll tell her. what happened, I told you that I went to Paris,
Yeah.
and I got my money, so I could go to any show I wanted to. I went to the Folies Bergère. If you're familiar with that, the old time when they used to start in the evening, it was a whole evening worth of performance.
Mm-hmm.
They would go for an hour and a half or so, and then they'd have a break, have something to eat, something to drink, and then the rest of it. Well, what happened, I rode that truck all day, went to the Folies Bergère, and I fell asleep. I woke up. And what happened, you can see I had a scar right here from my boyhood.
Uh-huh.
And what happened was, I don't know, one day where somebody was talking about seeing the Folies Bergère, and I said, well, I saw it. I said, I fell asleep in it. And they all thought I was kidding. And some of them said, well, Dobbins didn't fall asleep in it. He fell out on the balcony because he was trying to get after the girls or something. And I did have that scar you can see there.
Uh-huh.
So the rumor got around, everybody thought that I went to the Folies Bergère and I fell out of the balcony trying to get on the stage. And it spread out, you know how rumors spread.
Sure.
And so I saw the Folies Bergère as one of the shows that I did see. And I saw another one or two, I don't remember what they were, but the Folies was the place to go at that time.
Mm-hmm.
It's no longer in existence.
Now, you did see Mickey Rooney?
Well, Mickey Rooney came to us one time. I don't remember, you know, at that time the people in our particular situation weren't too interested in USO shows. Maybe they're interested in pretty girls coming and singing, but men, they...
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for your
Oh,
interview.
you're welcome.
Okay, go ahead.
One of the things that I like to end with is, I remember reading, must have been around 1994 or so, in the Albany Diocese newspaper, there was an old priest who was retiring, and they sent a fellow over to interview him. And when the fellow interviewed him, he talked to him mainly about his 50 years in the priesthood. And then he found out that this priest was an infantry chaplain during World War II, and he asked him, can you tell me what it was like to be up there where men are dying every day? And the old priest stood there for a few minutes, and he said, well, you know, he said, it's this way. He said, if you weren't there to see it, no explanation is possible. But if you were there to see it, he said, no explanation is necessary. And I remember that to this day. If you weren't there, no explanation is possible. If you were there, no explanation is necessary. And I think that piece of paper there explains it.
This piece here called about the hedgerows. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much.